All right, NFL fans, welcome back to another episode of The Way We See It. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Wesley Coleman for another weekly installment. Wesley, what's going on?
How's it going, man? We're moving along through this off season, so hopefully it fast forwards and gets out of here quick.
Hey, it's going to get pretty hot and heavy here soon with NFL free agency starting next Monday. I know that as of people hearing this, but as of when we're recording this, the deadline for people to be tagged, whether it's a franchise tag or a tender for a restricted free agent, is already come and gone. And so we'll talk about some of those players today on the podcast. But the NFL scouting combine is a wrap. Wesley, I'm sure you were watching. What did you think? What were your takeaways?
Obviously there was a few players that we hoped would do well that I think paired with what they had put on film the last year or two had probably better workouts than some were expecting. And I think if you're pairing great athleticism with the film, it looks really good. So I think that there was some pretty exciting stuff. There's obviously some guys that are pretty dang quick. I think it's still crazy when an offensive lineman runs a sub 5-second 40.
It's pretty crazy. That is pretty crazy. And I don't know who are the players that maybe you would label as like a winner or someone who's elevated their stock after the combine. Does anyone fall into that category?
Well, I mean, just starting off with the quarterback side, like I know Jackson Dart, there was already rumors that people expected him to kind of sneak up into the first round, some saying super high. But he performed incredible in the passing drills, which helped him a lot. Marion Hampton, the running back from North Carolina, he's a 221-pound guy that's 6 foot tall, supposed to be this big bruising wreck, and he runs a 4.46 40.
He's a freaking tank, man. He's a tank.
And to run that fast is on another level. And then another big one for me, and just personally, Mason Taylor from LSU just crushed it. He's 6'5" and 250, came in big, and the way he moved through the routes, the way he caught every single ball thrown close to him, really impressed everybody. And it was cool seeing like the feedback given to him. His dad's Jason Taylor, the former Dolphins defensive end. I think his who married Zach Thomas's wife, I believe, or a daughter or something like that. I don't know. Those all kinds of. He's got athleticism in his bloodline, and he really showed it at the combine.
What about the other side of the coin? What are some players that you think might have disappointed or didn't test as well as most people thought?
Well, I mean, so just starting off with Mason Taylor, just on the other end, a lot of tight ends just didn't go crazy. So one, I mean, like Tyler Warren not participating in the drills kind of helped, and it was not good for him. And then Harold Fannin did okay, but I don't think it was like the big blowout that they were expecting.
Yeah.
I know that Tez Johnson ended up running like a 4.5 40, which is a lot slower than he was projected to run. And then honestly, the big loser, I'm saving this one for last, but the big loser from whatever we're hearing is Shedeur Sanders.
Well, he didn't even test. And so like, this is being based solely on him choosing not to test. And then also the way that he handled the media in the interview session. So before we
not
talk about
not just the media, apparently the feedback we're hearing from his one-on-one interviews with teams is pretty negative.
Okay. I haven't read into him that much based on the fact that I don't think he's going to be an option at 21 when the Steelers select. So therefore, but he could be. God help us if he is, but still.
So I did hear a couple days ago from someone that was in Indianapolis. One, I got a text message telling me, we talked about Jackson Dart. Somebody tell me you're going to be shocked at how high Jackson Dart gets drafted. Okay. And that was before he threw at the combine. He told me that. And then later told me Shedeur Sanders had taken himself off of draft boards with just his attitude about like basically acting like people were lucky to be speaking to him. And then I know I saw an NFL reporter yesterday on X put that 2 teams in the top 10, both who have potential quarterback needs, were really not happy with the way he conducted himself and carried himself in their interview.
That's interesting. And, our Kevin Smith, who was at the combine, he even said, Shedeur Sanders brings with him this big persona. It comes from his father, growing up with a father that is Deion Sanders. He said, you know what you're getting yourself into. He believes personally that it just depends on where he goes, who takes a shot at him. Do they have the culture that can kind of bring him up the way he needs to be brought up? I don't know. But he also said that he doesn't feel like the film that he's seen of Shedeur Sanders matches the ego. And that's one of the big issues. Like, you'll take Deion Sanders in his ego because, well, he was a really good football player and is a top 10 talent. I don't know if Shedeur is there, but nonetheless, I do want to ask you, what are your thoughts about players choosing not to test? Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, listen, I understand Cam Ward not needing to test. Like, he's going to be the number one quarterback taken. I think if you're not the number one person at your position, you probably need to try and close the gap there, right? I mean, I guess there are guys who've put great film on out there that I don't know what Travis Hunter could go prove to anybody, right? I mean, true football player, athlete. I mean, what's
Yeah.
he gonna show? But I think I don't know. I think somebody like Shedeur Sanders needed to be out there. He also needed to nail his interviews. And I mean, you didn't have besides. I mean, Ashton Giante, the number one running back. I understand him not wanting to. Why? What's he gonna prove? Every other running back needs to be out there showing that they're right behind him and that maybe they can close the gap on with their numbers. And I guess some of these guys are going to save it for their pro day. So getting in that environment and doing those kind of things. I mean, it's they're gonna answer these questions sometime in the next month.
Right. And the thing is, Shedeur Sanders is such a polarizing figure. There's a lot of people that are going to see and hear us say this and think, oh my gosh, them and a bunch of other podcasts are really piling on this kid. He's just a polarizing character. But I look at exactly what you said. Cam Ward, the undisputed number one quarterback in this class. He chooses not to throw. Shedeur Sanders made his announcement before Cam Ward that he wasn't going to test at the combine. The moment if I'm Shedeur Sanders in his camp and I see that Ward's not throwing, I'm telling him, you need to throw.
Yep.
Like, you need to go out there and say, I'm going to close the gap. I'm going to prove that I'm a top 10 pick. I'm going to prove all this stuff. And he just chose not to. And that's their right. And he said, I'll throw at my pro day when Colorado hosts their pro day. But still, I feel like it's a missed opportunity. I really do.
He needs to throw a lot at his pro day.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting how they structure that workout because every team's pro day is going to be different. They have scouts that come in and help put them through workouts. What does that look like? Is it a limited script? Is it a really heavy workout? We'll see. But I don't want to spend too much time on the NFL scouting combine. If you want to hear more about what it was like having boots on the ground, check out the NFL Whip Round podcast that ran yesterday on the FFS and NFL podcast feed with Coach Kevin Smith and myself. Let's talk about free agency because that's the next real stepping stone this offseason. Players that are going to be on the move. There could be players that are signed. There could be players that are tagged. We know that T. Higgins received the franchise tag with the Cincinnati Bengals. We talked about that on this podcast already, and that was expected. Whether they get a long-term deal done with him, that's a different story altogether. But that's a lot of money being allocated to one specific player. Then you also look at a player like Trey Smith, guard for the Kansas City Chiefs, that is expected to be tagged, but at the time of this being recorded has not been tagged yet. So what I want to do, Wesley, is I want to take a look at some of these big name free agents. And I want to ask you, will they return to their current home, so to speak? Or do you think they'll be gone and finding a new home in free agency? And if you have an idea, you can let me know who you think it might be a good fit for. But really, it's any team, like for instance, a wide receiver. It's any team that needs a wide receiver. There's a lot of those. So I think it's appropriate to start with some quarterback talk.
Yeah.
Sam Darnold. Okay. Sam Darnold. No one knows what to think about Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold's coming off a 14-2 regular season with the Vikings. He did not finish the year strong, but people were wondering, is this guy nothing more than the product of a really good system, a really good coach, a really good offensive weaponry around him? Or has he turned the corner? What's your take on Sam Darnold in free agency?
I think he's going to get a starting job for sure. Are you ready for me to say which team I think he should go to?
I'm sure you're going to say Pittsburgh. Go ahead.
No, I think it's the
okay.
Raiders. I think it's the Raiders.
Okay.
I think you're going to need a good offensive coordinator to design something around him. Darnold's got good arm talent, and he is a mobile quarterback. He doesn't do well in the middle of the field and can attack the edges. I think an offensive coordinator like Chip Kelly, the Chip Kelly and Pete Carroll together, I think would do good work for Sam Darnold. And if Russell Wilson isn't going there, I think Sam Darnold would be great for them.
Yeah,
A good situation for him.
It would be. And I could honestly see him coming back to Minnesota. I could see him staying. And especially if Minnesota's like, we're not really sure about what we have in JJ McCarthy. Like, we like him, but he missed all of his rookie year. He's not ready yet. If they let him walk, what are they going to do? Some people thought, well, maybe Matthew Stafford would go there, but no, he's staying in LA. So what would they do if they just let him walk? I actually think he's going to stay. I think that Minnesota is going to find a way to work out a deal that's friendly for them. It's not a deep contract in terms of years and guaranteed money. But I think that he's going to look at it and say, I'm not going to find a situation that might be better unless it's just financials than where I am in Minnesota. So I'm going to say that he stays. Let's talk about another quarterback, someone close to home for me, and that is none other than Justin Fields. Believe it or not, Justin Fields actually does have quite a not a resume, but he has some suitors. Pittsburgh has rumored to been wanting him back. They could have negotiated a deal with him this entire offseason. I don't blame the quarterback for wanting to test the market, though. Reportedly, the Jets are in the mix. Garrett Wilson supposedly doing some lobbying to have his former teammate there in the Big Apple. The Giants are supposedly throwing their hat. All these different teams, even Raiders have said that they could be interested. Pittsburgh wants him back. What do you think about Justin Fields?
I think that Pittsburgh's going to be his only serious suitor.
Okay.
And I think that some of those teams that you just named is maybe doing his agent a favor.
Sure.
There's some stuff in there. I don't think anybody's going to get too far down the road. I think some people will have some conversations with him wanting to know if I hate doing this, but saying if there's a Taysom Hill role,
right,
that where he can play multiple positions. And I don't think they should do that. I think Taysom Hill's a unicorn. But I think he ends up back in Pittsburgh. I'm just not sure it's anything else gets too far down the road.
I agree with you. I think he stays in Pittsburgh. I think that, but for me as a Steeler fan, I would be unbelievably curious to what the deal looks like. His projected salary and compared to, we know that every year it blows out the projections. Projections are nothing because all of a sudden, Justin Fields might come to the table. The Steelers are hard pressed to get a guy, and so they bring him back. But let's talk about the other quarterback in Pittsburgh. So let's assume that Justin Fields does stay. What happens with Russell Wilson? He still wants to play. He did prove at times in 2024 that he's capable. Do you see a home for him?
Well, I mean, that's can't have every quarterback in Las Vegas. But I mean, that was kind of the one that made sense if they're not doing the Sam Darnold. And maybe they're not a team that needs to pay with their roster. Maybe it's a dumb thing for them to pay Sam Darnold $35 million a year if you can get Russell Wilson for $25 million a year.
That's true.
It's not like they're a quarterback away from being in their division, title race. So maybe Russell Wilson actually ends up making more sense for them. I think he's going to get on somewhere. The Giants, if they don't move on with, if they don't get Aaron Rodgers, I think would be in the Russell Wilson hunt as well.
It's going to be interesting. Like, you even heard Daniel Jones's name being thrown out there in free agency as a potential landing spot. Like that's how hard pressed some teams are to get a quarterback because they just have none. And so it's going to be really interesting. Let's go to wide receiver next. Let's talk about wide receivers. We mentioned T. Higgins. We've talked about it before. The Bengals are saying all the right things. We're going to get a long-term deal done and all this stuff. I just don't see how it works. But do you see him getting a long-term deal, or do you think that he just plays on the tag another year?
I mean, I think it's more likely that he's playing on the tag. It's just such a tough deal. And I mean, we've also heard reports this week. So we heard, 3 weeks ago that Joe Burrow wants to be flexible and he wants him and Jamar and T. Higgins to all stay there. Well, then we've also heard that Jamar Chase is about to be made the highest paid non-quarterback in the history of football.
Yeah.
Well, that means he's going to get paid $40 million a year. And I can't see it. I don't know if any of that long-term stuff drives up asking price if you do trade him. It's pretty tough. I do think T. Higgins plays there this year, but it's going to be on the tag.
I don't think this was a tag and trade situation. I don't think there's anyone that would want to take on that contract. But do you think that's an option for the Bengals?
I mean, so you're talking about the franchise tag would be around $24 million right this year.
For wide receivers around there, yeah.
Yeah, I could see somebody trading for that for T. Higgins with the idea that they're going to show him immediately offer him one of those big contracts for, they realize that they're going to pay him around $30 million a year after that. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't.
It's a smart move by the Bengals to do it. And
Yeah,
there's people
for
that
sure.
might say like this sucks for him, and it does, but it's in the CBA. They're allowed to do it. This is a smart move by the Cincinnati Bengals. If they're going to get rid of him, they're going to get something in return in terms of a trade. Let's talk about Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin is coming off of that ankle injury last season, which hampered him, and he's been reported to want to stay in Tampa Bay. We thought that he would follow the Mike Evans route last offseason. Mike Evans signed a deal before free agency even started, and that's still possible. But if he's slated to be a free agent, do you think there's much of a market for him?
I think there'll be some. Surprisingly, with Chris Godwin's 29 years old.
Right.
I would have thought him to be younger than that because it kind of took a while for his career to kind of start taking off. And then he's had a few injury riddled seasons. Tampa Bay makes the most sense. And Tampa Bay's got to understand that as well as Baker has played, they need to keep receiving threats around him. Mike Evans isn't going to be enough. Like you've got to keep a second big number two.
This is a position that when you look at the wide receivers, there's just not a lot out there, in my opinion, in terms of really quality receivers that are going to be on the free agent market. I mean, you could talk about Stephon Diggs coming off an ACL, and he brings his own baggage with him. Amari Cooper is going to be a free
at that point. We're to Amari Cooper, and then you go to Darius Slayton. You're falling off really fast, and that's if you're even considering Stephon Diggs a good wide receiver anymore.
Yeah,
exactly. I mean, this is the time where it's honestly, we circle back around. If the Bengals were ever going to trade T. Higgins, this is an off season to do it. If you've got, like a quarterback or a team like the Saints having Chris Olave, who's going to be on a 5th-year option next year, who's dealt with some injuries and all. If you're ever going to move on from a guy like that, instead of wanting to pay him $30 million in a couple years, this is the time when you could actually drive up the price of a wide receiver.
Right. Let's talk about some defenders. We're not going to go through the entire position groups here. We're just going to talk about some big name players. Josh Sweat, player we talked about last week, as we mentioned the Philadelphia Eagles potentially repeating. He's coming off of maybe his best game of his career in the biggest game of the season in the Super Bowl. And we talked about how he could have actually garnered some MVP talk of the Super Bowl. Do you think he stays? There's rumors coming out of the combine that the Eagles want to trade for Myles Garrett, in which case I don't see Sweat returning if that's the case.
Yeah, so if I'm just predicting, I think that Josh Sweat signs with the Cardinals. John Gannon, who's the head coach of the Cardinals, worked with Sweat in Philly. They would know each other. I think that Arizona's got the money to spend, and I think he's going to end up getting more money than what the Eagles think he's worth.
And that's fine. And that the Philadelphia might have a bigger plan and he might not be a part of that plan. But I think when you talk about pass rushers, again, it's very similar to wide receivers. So you have Josh Sweat, that's a big deal. But then you have Khalil Mack. Khalil Mack is going to be a free agent. This guy's definitely getting up there in age. He's going to turn 30. He's 34 years old now. Do you think that he has much of a market anymore in the NFL?
I mean, I don't know if he should. Yeah, I think he does though. You're going to get a couple of year deal. I mean, with a, $15 million per year guarantee out of it. And I think that if you're pairing him with another good pass rusher and he's your number 2 on only passing downs and stuff like that, I think you can get some use out of Khalil Mack. But I mean, he'll end up being a top 10 free agent on these free agent lists. I just think that you've got to start. He's always been good against the run game too. I'm not trying to say that, but I think at some point you're getting 34, 35, 36. You need to start making a plan for keeping him at his best on those passing downs.
Let's stay with the linebackers. The New Orleans Saints crown jewel Zach Bond, who actually was just a gem for them and turned it into a potential defensive player of the year season in Philadelphia. He's going to be a free agent. You said last week you think he stays. There's no way Philadelphia lets him walk. Do you still stand by that?
100%. And I think that Zach Bond's going to be on board with it too. Being the way he felt probably cast aside by the Saints, he's looking for loyalty, and no better way for him to also feel good about the process than staying with the team that did bring him in, gave him a starting job, and has promoted him all through this, and then him winning the Super Bowl with him. I think he's going to want to stay, and they're not letting him go away.
All right, I have a question here, and this is just in general. So, what in terms of free agency, how does baggage? We talked about Stephon Diggs has baggage. He's not necessarily known as the most a team first player. We'll put it that way. He has some off the field stuff. I'm not even getting into that, but still, he's got some off the field stuff. But then you have someone like Hassan Reddick, who, man, did he just completely F over the Jets, which I think is funny because it's the Jets. He's going to be a free agent. What does his market look like? He is still a talented player. He's not aged to the point where he's aging himself out of the league. In terms of Hassan Reddick, what does his free agency look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to get some offers. I think he'll have multiple teams in. Again, I mean, he's younger for a different reason, but completely on the same kind of thing I was saying about Khalil Mack. You've got to scheme him to be a rusher. He's not going to do the hard work of shedding blocks and tackling running backs. He's not going to be great against the run. But, I mean, he's a guy that gets sacks and forces fumbles in the backfield and all. Like he's going to have a market for sure. And I think he's probably going to be able to use the excuse of, well, look at the Jets. I mean, who would have wanted to do it? Man, I think if you'd have done that to a good team with like a good environment, like that maybe would look a little bit bad and eliminate a few people, but everybody wants to leave the Jets.
Is he going to do the hard work of showing up? Is the question.
I mean,
now that was a different situation. Looking back on it now, when Philadelphia traded him to New York, it made sense. Like they probably saw there were some flags here. We should probably dump this guy while we can. And then he gets traded, probably doesn't want to leave Philly, doesn't want to go to New York. And so he just up and doesn't show up. And then finally does when he wants to get his new deal done. He's going to have his choice of suitors. So I don't foresee that being an issue. You agree or disagree?
I think any smart contending team is going to want to structure his deal based with elevators. And, I'm not saying a low base salary, low guarantee, but a mid-range guarantee that's not where it's not all guaranteed. They're going to make him show up and play games and all that. And I think if he's wanting to join, a team that's contending and growing, he's going to have to accept some of that as well.
It's going to be interesting. So looking at the free agency list again, this is not a great free agency crop.
It's weird.
It really, you have some players who are going to be considered good players, like Nick Bolton. He's a good player. But my question is Nick Bolton a player that transcends scheme and can play in any scheme, or is it just Steve Spagnuolo and they put him in the perfect spot in Kansas City? What does his free agent market look like? Are there any other players that are going to hit free agency that you would want to bring up?
Well, I mean, Nick Bolton, I think, is one that he's going to have to be in the right scheme.
Right.
He's going to have to be paired. Goes after running backs. He is a downhill against the run kind of linebacker. He's not great against the pass at all. I think you've got to put him in a defense with great coverage, some a linebacker and a good nickel that can cover those tight ends, and you're not asking him to do that at all. So I think it's the right scheme that you're looking for with an already talented defense. Nick Bolton can be a superstar in it if you let him kind of stay in his lane. So I think staying in Kansas City, Denver would be a really good fit for him with their cornerbacks and coverage ability. But I will say that, I mean, one that's kind of fallen down the list a little bit, but Aaron Jones is back being available as a free agent after he only signed the 1-year deal this past year, and he had a really good season. So I think he's one that's kind of interesting of what's going to happen with him and who he's going to sign with, based on how running back value is kind of maybe making a rebound a little bit after what we saw last year with 2 of the top 11 rushing seasons in history by running backs who were free agents last offseason?
Those guys are like, those are an upper echelon type player. Like you talk about Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs. Like these aren't just your run of the mill guys. Like this year, it's
Derrick Henry.
Yeah, and Derrick Henry. These are the, you look at this year, the crop is Aaron Jones and like Najee Harris. That's not the same. Like not all running backs are created equal. I watched Najee Harris for 4 years, every single snap he took, and he's a good player. He's durable, but he's not what we saw last offseason in terms of free agency. I think the running back position is valued more, but I do think it's a year by year thing. I wouldn't see any running backs breaking the bank this year.
I thought that, well, there's just not very many. It's not a great free agent class, but there's not, and I think that it's great for Aaron Jones that the Najee Harris is the only other starting caliber or whatever you want to call it running back.
Sure.
And me and you've talked about a lot. I mean, I didn't watch Najee Harris as much as you, but every time I would watch the game, like I was just like, is he trying to run fast? Like I never realized how much he reminded me of if Marion Barber was 45 years old trying to play football, and he did all the same like I'm so tough and I'm going to run around you and over you kind of stuff, but in a slow motion. It was so weird.
Yeah, that's a good comp. Marion Barber was way more explosive than Najee Harris.
Right. It was just without the explosive. They have the same style and want to.
So, all right, real quick before we call it a show, I want to get your thoughts on the trade market because we saw a trade happen during the combine, and that was Deebo Samuel going to the Washington Commanders for a 5th-round draft pick, but the Commanders are picking up 100% of his contract. So the 49ers, when you look at what they're trying to do, they're trying to unload salary because they want to sign Brock Purdy, and they do have some other people that they want to assign. What did you think about that trade first and foremost?
I think that it's Washington needed to do something like that. They do need to get more explosive, players around Jaden Daniels to take advantage of what he's got going on. If I think Deebo's coming in to be their number 2, which is you've talked about the 49ers and their wide receivers for the last couple of years. And I think it puts Deebo Samuel in the right position. One, he's kind of going to be their 3rd running back. He's going to be the number 2 wide receiver. If he can stay healthy and not weigh 230 pounds, he's in a great situation there where now on top of, Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler and Jaden Daniels running ability, you've got Deebo Samuels who can run. And then Terry McLaurin was the only wide receiver on this team, and he still did great, even drawing all that attention. Deebo's going to be the number 2, and you're not able to double him. So I think you can put in the right position where you can put the ball in his hands. And I think Cliff Kingsbury is going to have a lot of fun if he's healthy. No idea if he can be healthy.
That's the biggest question. That's the biggest question is, can he stay healthy? He hasn't been able to stay healthy, I think, the last few seasons since he signed that big deal with San Francisco. And San Francisco is now trying to shop their other receiver who they signed last offseason, who's coming off an ACL and an MCL tear. Brandon Ayuk, for those that don't know. I don't know who would want to touch that guy.
Former Steeler target, future Steeler target.
I'm so done with that. I don't.
It's coming. It's coming.
Any receiver. The Steelers are the cupboard is so burnt receiver for them.
You want Amari Cooper or you want Brandon Ayuk? Those are your options.
I take Amari Cooper. I swear to God, I would. All right.
So we're talking about trade candidates and wide receivers. Yeah. Are the Rams going to trade Cooper Kupp?
I think teams are waiting them out. I think that they look at the Rams and say, you're not going to pay this guy his salary, and so you're going to end up cutting him. Why would we trade you when we think you're going to cut him? I think they're just waiting him out. Same with Devontae Adams.
Right?
Yeah. So just wait him out. They'll get cut eventually, and then you can sign him, and it will be a bidding war from there. But I think that Cooper Kupp does not play in LA, just like I don't think Devontae Adams plays in New York. You agree?
Yeah, I think, but neither one of them is going to be with their current team for any of the 2025 season.
Oh my gosh. Where do you think Aaron Rodgers is going to play in 2025? Or does he play in 2025?
Man, the Giants stuff makes sense. The Minnesota kind of rumor's fun. To
completely follow the Brett Favre.
It is so much fun to think about. Especially you're talking earlier, JJ McCarthy. Now, is this where Aaron Rodgers finally like says like, okay, I'll go be a mentor, like, but I'm going to be the starter in 2025.
Right.
I think he's gonna. I mean, he will start somewhere this near year, and it won't be obviously the Jets. I could see the Giants though. They have a big receiver like Malik Neighbors who's up and coming, and he had a great season with, I mean, basically me and you throwing to him last year. Even though Aaron Rodgers isn't what he used to be, you put him in there, they're gonna at least get some yardage.
You're right. Absolutely. So we'll see how this goes next week. By the time we record this show, we will have players already signing contracts. Free agency will be underway. It'll be a lot of fun to discuss that. But Wesley, in the meantime, why don't you tell us where they can find you on social media and fun stuff like that?
You can find me on X at whodatwesley13. I'll talk to you about any sports and anything going on. Also movies. Watch Paradise on Hulu. It's awesome. They're not a sponsor. Jeff, where can we find you?
Well, you can also hit up Wesley about all the Kyrie Irving ACL news that's
Man,
happening
come
with
on.
the Dallas Mavericks.
Team Tank, baby. Let's go. We got to get that top 7 pick.
As for me and my Steelers coverage and golf news, all that fun stuff at J Hartman, HARTMAN_PIT. And you can check us out at the Steel Curtain Network, steelcurtainnetwork.com. So that's it. Wesley, thanks for your time, man. We'll talk next week.
Thanks, buddy.